I was talking about doing something, loving for yourself. And, one of the first things I did do loving for myself, which I talked about a little bit earlier, was to open up in that group, when I was in rehab. And that was the most courageous thing that I did at that time in my life. And, the benefit from it was enormous. I can remember when I sat there that day and I started sharing about it. And when I finished, I realized that I was happier. I felt like that, that I wasn't alone. And that was the biggest thing for me to get over, is that feeling of loneliness. Because most of the time in my life, after the abuse, I always felt alone. It was kind of funny that loneliness became my best friend, and I became real comfortable with it. And that's what I talked about earlier about living in your head, and everything seems like it's very one-dimensional. It's a movie screen. And, kind of at that point, I felt like, after I shared, I became a participant, in life. But when I did share, though, the counselor at that time, he said something to me, and it made all the difference in the world. And he said, Gene, he said, I know that you are mad at your brother, and I know you are mad at God. He says, the issue of God, we'll deal with that later. But as far as the anger at your brother, which is really controlling your life, think about it like this, that, what you were looking for and what your brother was looking for, in that house was love, and you became a threat to him. He says, but it's real important to remember that most things that have happened to you in the past and that will happen to you, most of the times it will have nothing to do with you. Which I told Ron, I said, well, Ron, I don't understand that, because it happened to me. How could it not be about me? And he says that, it could have happened to anybody. That's just how, he felt. He was upset because he wasn't getting the love. He says it really wasn't personal about you. That is his own sickness. It could have been anybody that he was pissed off at, or that would have been the target of his anger. And it wasn't about me. And, he really started taking me through it. And I started realizing that, even as a child, there was nothing I did to provoke that type of behavior. Most of the times, when people are abused, we didn't go to that person and flirt or ask to be abused. That doesn't happen. It's the abuser's sick behavior that makes them abused. It had nothing to do with me. And he said, Gene, you're also going to have to be able to forgive. If you can't forgive that person, you will also never grow past it. He said, but the two work together. Is once you realize that that person who did that to you was a sick person, then you'll be able to move on. And knowing that it had nothing to do with you. And you have to pray for that person, or at least at this point, Gene, just realize that that person had issues. It's nothing you did. You're not less of a person. You didn't ask for this. You were just an object to him so that he can vent his frustration. And once I started thinking about that, and I left because, I really doubted what Ron was saying. I always figured that he hated me. But it wasn't until a couple days later when I realized, well, how could somebody hate somebody that's 8 or 9 years old? What could I have really done at 8 or 9 years old to provoke that type of behavior out of anybody? And then, we hear stories, like let's say the story, with Scott Brown. He's at a camp, and the person that worked at the camp abused him. They didn't spend enough time together that would make that person upset at the senator to do those things. That didn't happen. That was that individual's sick behavior, and we don't know what happened to him when he was younger. Chances are that he was abused. I don't know what happened to my brother. I know there was a lot of dysfunction in our home. I know that there was issues that he had. And in fact, when I look and see what place or where he's even at today, part of that sickness has never been dealt with because he's still going through issues in his life. Which really tells me that, even though I believe what Ron said after I had a couple of days to digest what he was saying, I really look at it today and I'm like, he was exactly right. It has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the person who abused us and how sick they are. And that's why it was easier for me to forgive. I really realized that, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Was I upset with him for many years for doing what he did to me? Yes. Do I forgive him for what happened? Yes. Because it's too difficult for me to be mad at somebody that's sick. It would be kind of like, let's say if I had the flu, and I'm around you, and I make you sick. And I didn't know I had the flu. And that's the catch. The abuser doesn't think that they're sick. Most of the time. Most of the time. So if I have a virus and I'm around people and I get them sick, then they're going to say, well, if the guy knew he was sick, why didn't he just keep his butt at home? Any analogy I could give wouldn't really rise to the level of abuse. But the point I'm trying to make is that I was spreading a virus and that I didn't know to whomever was close to me. And that's kind of what it is. That's kind of what it is, or at least that's the place that I found where I could find forgiveness. I could say, you know what, God, help him out. I understand today. And that's why I always say that if I could live my life all over again, I would do it exactly the same way. And it wasn't until years later where I really started looking at the God side of it. Because I had to forgive the abuser. And then I also had to really get to know or find some place where I could say, okay, God, you know what? I believe that you have a plan, and I also believe that something greater is going to come from this. I had no idea 20 some years ago when I was sitting in that group and that I decided to share that I would become an advocate for male sexual abuse. That never dawned on me. If I would have thought about that, it would have been so out of my realm of thinking that it wouldn't have made sense to me. There's no way possible that somebody could have said, you know what, Gene, God may have wanted you to go through all that because he knows that you will speak out on it. Who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that the person that abused me, in my case, was my brother, was a sick individual.